Hi, I'm Vernon Reed with the BeCon Conversations, and I'm here today with Miss Renee Coppin, the owner of not one, but two hotels here in Barbados, Infinity on the Beach and Pirates Inn. Welcome, Renee.
Hi.
Full disclosure, Renee and I attended the same secondary school. She was a great friend there and an inspiration there, and she's an inspiration now. So I am truly excited to be able to share Renee, what she's doing with the world. So Renee, just wanted to start off by talking about a little bit about your path. We met at St. Michael's Secondary School. But tell me a little bit about what your path to now.
So I am born and I've lived all of my life in Barbados.
Okay.
And I'm from St. John, which is a very rural parish. So I grew up attending a school called Codrington, which is in St. John, before I went on to St. Michael's. And I think Codrington very much was a very Montessori kind of, more relaxed type of learning environment. So I think that helped to shape the kind of person that I am. I didn't go into school, like a lot of people came into St. Michael's with a group of friends from their school. I was the only person in my year that came to St. Michael's. We had a very small class at Codrington. So when I came to St. Michael's, I had to, adjust and make friends and kind of being an individual spirit and thinker, I think is a huge part of who I am. So when you asked me earlier about taking you back as far as primary school, I actually reflected on that because I think Codrington helped to shape me in ways that maybe if I'd gone to a larger school or another type of school, I would not have been shaped. And then I came to St. Michael's, which was for me a great experience. I really enjoyed it. Made good friends, people like yourself and other
Best
people.
School in Barbados.
The world and other places is what I tell people. And then from there I went on to continue my studies at Barbados Community College. I think I was bright, and I'm not flattering myself, but people told me that. But I wasn't particularly academic. And at St. Michael's, you know this because you were told, I didn't want to do sciences, but I was told that the bright kids were going into science. So we ended up in a science forum doing subjects I frankly hated. And I wish maybe I'd had a conversation then with someone who could have told me a little bit more about business and maybe but I think in life, there's nothing that you do that is wrong. Everything kind of helps to shape and frame you into the person that you become. So I went on to BCC. I did more
And for those, BCC is Barbados Community College here.
Because St. Michael's didn't have a sixth form.
Right.
And at that time it was A-levels and you went to sixth form school. And I knew I didn't want to go into school.
Right.
So I went to BCC and enjoyed my 2 years there as well. I did a lot of liming. And then I went on to university. And here in Barbados at University of the West Indies. And then straight from there into work.
So at University of West Indies, Cave Hill campus, what was your major
Business.
Business. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, and I finally figured out that I think that was what I wanted to do. So you did business management. When you do a degree in business, you come out, you're not qualified to do anything really. If you do law, you're a lawyer. If you do medicine, you become a doctor. But business is just one of those things that you do when maybe you can't figure out what else you want to do. But I think it's such a good foundational area of study because it gives you such a range of expertise and knowledge and things that are really important in terms of just job skills and life skills. So from there I went and my first job was as a tour rep for a company called Thompson. And it was, I didn't see it as a career move, but it was the job that when I applied for, I got first out of university and I loved it. I really, really enjoyed it, but it wasn't a career move. So I then went on and did other things.
So that was your first foray into the hospitality business?
Yes, straight out of university.
Okay.
And I loved it.
Now I know you had some experience with, I mentioned IBM, and it was at a Cisco conference that you had kind of an awakening, if you would say. So tell us about that.
No, I was working with IBM, and IBM is a phenomenal company. You're in IT, so you know that. But it was just not for me. I was a rep, a sales and marketing rep, and we were about providing solutions. The IT speak to our clients. But I found it wasn't enjoyable for me. And the thing I enjoyed about it most was interacting with the customers.
Got it.
And I knew from my first experience working that I thought that I had a good, strength in hospitality and customer service. So I was in a Cisco conference and I was like, God, what am I doing here? I literally was floating above myself and saying like, this is not where I need to be. And from there I made a serious effort to start reading the paper from the back and looking for something that was more along the lines of what I wanted to do and where I wanted to be. And I saw a very small ad, and I tell this story all the time, for They didn't even identify what the company was. And I applied for it because it was something hospitality related and you were going to be marketing small hotels. And it turned out that that was the Intimate Hotels of Barbados. It was the secretariat they were trying to set up, and they were looking for their first executive director. And that's how I came back into hospitality. That was 22 years ago, and no regrets.
So that's interesting what you shared, right? So there are many people who may be watching and they're wondering, like, you know, how do we get to where this person is or where that person is? For you, it wasn't that it was defined from the jump. Right. If you can take yourself back to those times, maybe when you were at the Cisco conference, or when you started to read the paper from the back, what did you draw on, you know, to help you make the decisions on what path to take? Because sometimes when you don't have a path, sometimes it's very hard to make a decision. So what did you draw on?
I don't think it was anything too phenomenal. It was just figuring out this was not where I wanted to be and having a sense of where my strengths lay and trying to figure out how do I best utilize my strengths in service to myself, because I'm somebody who thinks that you live your best life if you're doing something that you enjoy. And so awesome. I just decided that I wanted to go back and get back into working in tourism and working in hospitality. And you grow up hearing tourism is our business and all of that. You would know this. So I just felt that that was where I could make my best contribution. And at that time, I didn't know that I wanted to work for myself, but I think I figured it out along the way, because I don't think I was ever a great employee. I was always the one who was going to question, who was going to push, who's going to, when things didn't make sense, I would say they didn't make sense. And that doesn't always lend to being a great employee. So all along the way, I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do and where I wanted to go. And it was just trying to put the pieces together for myself, because that's a journey that, you know, it's a journey only you can take. Yeah. But I knew that ultimately I had to be in a position where I had a lot of autonomy and I had, you know, the ability to kind of direct my own path. So Intimate Hotels was a great stepping stone because I was setting up something new. It was exciting. I got to be a part of building something, utilizing the skills I'd learned across the board in different sectors and different businesses to help create something new. And I got to collaborate with a lot of people in the industry. And then the opportunity came for me to start at Pirates Inn because one of the owners said in a very casual conversation, she was looking to, you know, move into a different stage in her life and she's looking to sell the property. And that's kind of how the conversation about that started. And that's how I got into running hotels.
So I think at that point, from what I kind of researched and I know a little bit, you were saying that the owner was at a different stage in their life. And I believe you were as well, because you had just gotten pregnant or just had a baby, and therefore you were looking for something that might be a little bit easier.
Sorry.
Right?
Yeah, easier, that I thought I would have more time, and, you know, I really didn't. I was pretty clueless. But I just thought, you know, I just had literally, when I took over Pirates Inn, I had just had my second child. So I took over Pirates Inn in November. Right. Obviously, the discussion leading up to it was before that. But I'd had my first child the year before, and then I had a second child that year. And so there was a lot going on in my life, and I felt I was at a stage where I needed to have more autonomy. And, you know, so that is how I made that decision. And it was the right decision, but certainly in terms of time and having more time to myself, definitely not. I don't think I've ever worked as hard as I did when I started running that property. Okay. Like, I can literally remember almost a 24-hour shift when I had a lot of check-ins, an event that was going on. I literally remember being at the hotel, and it was only the next day when I realized, shoot, I'm still at the hotel. So you work hard, and for me it was learning a lot, but I was enjoying it, so it didn't feel like hard work.
About you know, there are many people now who want to get into entrepreneurship, do their own thing, right? And it's almost romanticized. So can you share a little bit about going from, you know, thinking about getting into entrepreneurship, as we mentioned before, thinking it might be a little bit more efficient in time, to actually getting into it? And you mentioned having to work sometimes 24-hour shifts. You're always the person, right? Can you help someone out there who's thinking about entrepreneurship, maybe prepare for that better? So,
yeah, the idea of romanticizing entrepreneurship is one that I find a little bit problematic, because I don't I didn't set out to be an entrepreneur. And for many years, actually, until I started this business, I struggled with that definition because to me, I felt an entrepreneur is somebody who creates something new and who defines a category, who does something that's really innovative. And to me, taking over Pirateson was not. I was going to be working for myself. I was self-employed,
right.
But I wouldn't have embraced the title of entrepreneur. So I had a little bit of imposter syndrome, and people would attach that label to me. For me, the motives for getting into it, I was always a hard worker, and I was always prepared to work hard. And I understood that if I was going to do something on my own, it would require hard work. I figured just it would be me more framing how that work was structured. But I think for people who are looking to get into business or who are looking to start something up, for me, that's fundamental. And I hear a lot of talk around, I think sometimes to myself, am I just not clever enough? Because I hear a lot of talk around working smart. And you know, if you're really switched in, you're going to be able to come in and define your ideas and execute this business and not have to do a lot of hard work. Because if you're doing it right, but that's not been my experience. For me, it was just about understanding that this is something that I wanted to do. And once I got into running business, understanding that it's something that I'm competent at because I work so hard. Like I always had a good work ethic.
Yeah.
And so I think for persons, if they're looking at getting into business, and unless they really have just created an idea that is so unique and they are so revolutionary in what they're doing that they're going to be able to hit the ground and make lots of money and do everything very easily because everybody's going to be rushing to them.
Yeah.
A lot of it is very plodding. A lot of it is not romantic. A lot of it's not exciting or sexy, but it is ultimately very rewarding. And so I don't know that I would take the label of entrepreneur because, as I said, I only felt comfortable that I had created something new when I started this business, which I did almost 9 years ago. I would say to people that you just need to determine what it is you want to do, determine what your idea is, and be prepared to work hard to execute it. And maybe that's boring, and maybe it's not very exciting, and maybe it's not what somebody who's really switched on would tell you, but that's been my path.
You had mentioned before about your grandmother and how she was an inspiration to you and your family. And I had heard you say even although your grandfather was working and so on, it was really your grandmother who really kind of ran the household, and how she prepared your mom, and also was an inspiration to you and your siblings as you move forward into your careers, etc. So I want to tie that back to your hard work and talk about your grandmother. Tell me some more about what your grandmother means to you and how you think she would feel about you now in your role.
That's a really good question. And thank you for giving me the chance to talk about her because she was a real salt of the earth Barbadian woman. And she, to me, represents what being a good citizen is about. Like she was so hardworking, so committed to family, so committed to community building. And when I think about her and the legacy that she's left in terms of just the values that she handed down, just the way that she showed us how we should work, how we should contribute, how we should give back, the kinds of things that she talked about, like my grandmother would have gone to Standard 7, which is back in their day, if you couldn't afford to go on, most kids went to Standard 7 education.
Right.
But she was very kind of grounded in the importance of education. She spoke to us, both my grandparents, a lot about growing up ignorant under the Union Jack and the importance of us utilizing the education that we got for free from government. I never heard my grandparents talk about taking anything from government. So I grew up with the ethos that you work hard for yourself and your responsibility as a good citizen is to give back to your country. And so I think all of those things have grounded me. Awesome. I get a little bit emotional when I think about my grandmother, but she walks with me every day. I like to think that she's looking down and being very proud of what I've done, of not just here in business, because this is nice, but the kind of mother that I've become, the kind of example I try to set to my kids. I would like to think that, and I walk with her legacy, and that's important.
And in talking about that, the whole person, right? So you're Renee, businesswoman. You're a wife, you're a mother, you're a daughter. How does handling all of that, right? How do you handle all of that? Or what would you say to someone who are in those spaces? Because it's a very dynamic to me.
It is.
What are your thoughts on that?
I think you need to be very forgiving of yourself. What has worked well for me is that I have a good support system, and I try to be the kind of person that I want others to be to me. So my relationship with my family, with my sons, with my mother, not that I'm always perfect, I'm very far from, but I try to provide to them the kind of example of what I want them to reflect back to me. So I do try to be a good daughter. I do try to be there for my mother. I do try to build family with her and to make sure that we interact with her a lot, that I make sure the boys interact with her a lot. I do try to be a good wife. I do try to give support to my husband and to, in the same way I expect him to be romantic to me, to also show those things to him. Yeah. And with my kids, one of the things I've sought to do is to say to them that it is very critical to me that I'm raising them as two well-directed, self-directed, responsible, decent human beings. And that's fundamental. So I don't focus a lot on what they do or their grades or, yeah, those things matter. But fundamentally for me, it's the type of men that I see them becoming. And so for me, balancing everything is about one, forgiving myself because I don't always get it right. I'm not always great at everything. But to be able to exist in a balanced way in all of the spaces that I occupy and to give of my best in everything that I do. And my best is not always great. Sometimes I'm very mediocre, but it is always my best that I'm able to do in that moment. And that's what I try to do.
Wonderful. I like what you said about forgiving yourself or being very forgiving to yourself. Critical. I think is great advice. Great advice. How is it working with your husband? So I know, so many times, what was the statement? Many times people would say before, behind every good man is a good woman, right? And behind this great woman, Renee, there's also a great man in Kenny. So tell us about Kenny and working with him and how that dynamic of working and also being husband and wife and parents at home, how does that impact each other?
I think we have been very good at defining what roles we do best and just kind of sticking to that kind of almost like a job description. So he's the operations manager and he's excellent at it. All the things that I did not enjoy so much about running the property, he has now taken over. And because he came in after I started Infinity. Before that, he'd always worked for somebody else. Right. But he's really good at, because he likes being out and about, he's very good hands-on things. So he takes on board the things that I may have struggled with more in terms of the property, the operational aspects, and then he frees me to focus on the things that I think I'm a little bit better at in terms of things like marketing and HR and those types of things. So our partnership works well, and we actually in a day, we try to have lunch together a few times a week, but outside of that, we don't actually see each other a lot during the workday, even though he's always in my office. I haven't figured out how to get rid of him from my office. In terms of if I'm not here, it's the easiest office to be in because it's on the ground floor, his is on the upper floor. But I think we balance it well because we are very clear as to what we do best. And again, it is trying to ensure that we stay in our spaces. Even at home as a father, there are things that he is better at with dealing with the boys than I am. So I always say I'm Minister of Education. He's Minister of Sports, Community Affairs, Youth Development. So he holds his portfolio and I hold mine, and he will consult with me through things that he's not clear about. But because we have such clear in our mind strengths, we work towards those strengths and we try to make sure that we do that, whether it's at work or at home, and it works. So far, it's worked out pretty well. Great.
So you guys stay in your lane, based on your strengths.
That's right.
And respect each other.
That's correct. That's correct. And give each other space as needed, and we come together as needed. And fundamentally, we know that we're working towards the same goal. We have very similar values, and that's worked very, very well for us.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
All right, I have, so I'm going to read the statement here. Ready?
I'm ready.
So I'm committed to ethical, responsible, and decent leadership of people because if COVID-19 has taught us nothing else, it has reminded us that life is our most valuable resource. We've come to the realization that many of our models of business and society are dysfunctional and ineffective. And in order for us to move forward, we must actually go back to the basics. We're challenged to use this moment to make positive changes that truly provide opportunities for us to create not just an equal world for women, but a greater world for us all. You know who said that?
Wow. Yeah.
That was you,
Yeah.
right? So what are your thoughts around, in the statement says, we must actually go back to the basics when it talks about business and some dysfunctions there. Elaborate a little bit more on that statement.
For me, I think I wanted to respond to that by saying one of the things that bothered me a lot during COVID was when companies were going on about, and I'm not saying it doesn't have its place, of course it does, about, they weren't profitable during COVID and they were. I think in society, in business, we have to be very mindful that at the end of the day, it is about building a better world. It's about sustainability. It is about ensuring that what we're doing stands the test of time. And so the models that we have built our society, particularly in Barbados, which is more of a colonial, obviously you know the historical background of Barbados, how we developed as a society. A lot of the things we've done, in my view, have been very extractive. They've been about creating value above creating sustainable models. They've been about extracting wealth as opposed to creating ways that we can ensure that society moves forward on a footing that allows all of us over time to benefit. And so I thought COVID was a really good opportunity to kind of reshape that narrative, because we shut down, we gave up everything, especially if you were in this industry. You kind of had to start from ground zero almost again. I thought it was a great opportunity for us to try and see how we could go forward a little bit better than we were doing it in the past, because a lot of the things we have done in the past have not worked well, have not been sustainable. And especially as a small society, everything that we do has to speak to sustainability, has to speak to how do we make this better for the next generation? How do we make sure that this can continue even past us? And I would like that we are kind of moving forward in that space. And I think that's coming out of my grandmother too, because I came from a farm. On a farm, you grow what you eat.
Okay.
The scraps you have go back to feeding the animals. So everything, it is a very kind of a circular way of living, and you see the benefit of everything that you do, and you see where things come from, you see where you start and you see where it ends, and you're able to be a part of that process. So I think for me, it was reflecting on all of those things, and in a moment where we were in a very, very dark space in many regards, how do we make the opportunity out of this, and how do we emerge from it better than we were before?
I recently heard a quote, or I'm kind of paraphrasing here, but someone said, I think a leader's job is to eliminate fear. That's their number one job, right? And I know that there are a lot of different quotes on leadership. For you, what do you think is the number one job of a leader? And what would be your leadership style?
I would like to think my leadership style is more one of, my son wrote a speech, and one of the quotes he used was, a good leader knows the way, shows the way, and goes the way. I may have that in the wrong order, but essentially that's it. And I think that's the kind of leadership I would like to provide, where people are able to look at me and see in me that I'm willing to do, and I'm willing to provide them with guidance and support in doing, and we can walk the path together. And sometimes that means I'm out front, and sometimes literally I'm not. Sometimes I'm just a cheerleader, but they understand that at the end of the day, I'm with them, and we are about moving this forward together. So that's the kind of leadership that I would like to provide.
Great. Walk this path together. All right. I'm going to switch a little bit and talk about technology. I know in your master's you had done e-commerce and its impact on tourism. And you had a stint at IBM where you're kind of more in the tech space, even although you were maybe in marketing arena, sales and marketing arena. But as an owner in hospitality, how is technology enabling what you all are doing here, and how do you see technology being more impactful, as you grow, not just your own hotel space, but from the hospitality industry as a whole? COVID actually was a good opportunity for us to look at how we utilize technology in hospitality. I think Barbados, certainly I will say for my hotels, I'm probably behind a lot of the world, developed world, in terms of how we utilize technology. I remember going to a hotel in Amsterdam, maybe it was just outside Schiphol, I don't remember, but whatever country it was in, there was no human interface, maybe the bar.
but you checked in via computer. Everything in the room was completely automated. I did see housekeepers while I was there, so they were still using physical housekeepers. But the goal of that hotel was to make everything as efficient as possible by removing the human element. I don't ever envisage that I want to be there. But what I would like to be doing is where we are right now, where I'm utilizing technology in terms of managing the business more effectively. So one of the things we did just before COVID was to change our property management system. And that's really the brains of your operation. So we brought in a system which I think allows us a lot more to get more information about how we're operating our business, to integrate better the food and beverage and the other components, the housekeeping, because we weren't doing that well before. So that's kind of how I see technology and using it as an enabler and a supporter to what we do. But I don't ever want it to reach a place where we remove the human element that's so critical to hospitality. Right. So for me, technology in hospitality is about how do we do what we're doing more efficiently using that tool, as opposed to figuring out how that tool can replace human beings. Because I view that having somebody to check you in and to introduce you to Barbados and with a smile is important. Yeah. I view that when you go into my restaurant, that the system should work well in terms of efficiently sending orders and then obviously the processes around that. But I view that having somebody to serve you, to walk you through the menu, and all those touch points that we interact with real human beings are very critical. I view that having maintenance interacting with the guests as they walk around the property is very critical. I view that all of the human elements that we have in hospitality will continue to be important, but technology is just going to be the tool and platform that hopefully we can use more efficiently. For example, small thing like the QR code. We previously obviously were doing physical menus, and we've gone back to physical menus because people would come in and they'd be like, "Oh, I don't have my phone with me." Right. So you still have to produce a physical menu, but certainly having the option of the QR code makes it easier and more seamless for those people who want to use technology. Yeah. So it's kind of meeting the customers where they are and utilizing technology to support what we're already doing and doing it better or more efficiently.
Great. Many times I say that it's not technology for technology's sake, right? Yeah. Technology is there to basically help you be better at what you're doing. So if interacting with your end customer is obviously paramount. How does technology help with that? How does technology help make that more efficient or even more impactful?
Correct.
And so great. So Renee, not only you're the owner of 2 hotels, mother, daughter, sister, wife, and there's a whole host of responsibilities with that. You've been newly appointed as the chairman of the Barbados Hotel and Tourism Association. And you're also on the board of Intimate Hotels.
Yes.
Okay. What does your schedule look like? So first I'll have this question. Are you a morning person or an evening person? Let's start there.
I think if it were left up to my natural, is it called circadian rhythm, whatever that is? Yeah. I think I would be a night person. I'd be awake at night and sleep more. But and sleeping is something I'm working on because I read this book, that the importance of sleep, and it basically just exploded the way I've been handling my life. So I've been trying to sleep more, but generally my schedule is that I just work until I finish most of the things that I need to accomplish. And sometimes that's later in the night, and sometimes I start earlier in the morning, but it just depends on the day. Okay. So I don't have a set rhythm right now, but one of the things I've been trying to do is get 6 to 7 hours of quality sleep.
Okay. And so what are some of the things that you're doing here in this role as chairman currently? And what's your vision?
So the biggest, the chairman thing, I think took me a little bit. I mean, people told me, right, that it's going to be hectic, but I think it took me a little bit by surprise in terms of the amount of my time it takes up. Yeah. Before I took on the role, I spoke to my boys and to Kenny, and I made sure I checked with my staff because I said, if I do this, I need your support because from what I've heard, it takes up a lot of time. Mm-hmm. And they were all like, yeah, Renee, you could do it, man. You can manage this. You got this. But it definitely has exceeded my expectations in terms of how much time it takes. And I think, too, because the industry is at such a critical place right now where we're trying to rebound from COVID. And you know that tourism is Barbados, our major economic driver. Mm-hmm. So I take what I'm doing seriously. I take it seriously because this is my home. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, the contribution I make does make a difference. And I think what has saddened me is that people have attributed all kinds of motives to my actions. But for me, this is it, right? If I come into a commitment or I commit to doing something, I want to do it to the best of my ability. And I want everyone around me to be on that same page because this is too important for us to be playing games with it. We cannot play games with tourism. This is people's livelihood. This is our economy. And so there are critical things that we need to be focused on now as a country and as people to take this country forward and out of where we are right now. You know that Barbados is one of the most indebted countries in the world. You know that obviously we're emerging from a pandemic, which has placed us even further into that hole. And so for me, I want that when my son, who's going away to university, has finished university, he has the option to come back to work. That there's something that we have to offer him. Mm-hmm. You understand? Because we've given him a lot, and I would like, in the same way you talk to me about wanting to find things to do at home, and I want that he has that option. I want that he is incentivized to contribute back to Barbados and that he feels that there are things for him here and not that he has to take all that he's been given and just utilize it somewhere else. Right. So what I do, I view as very serious and I take it very seriously. And yes, it takes up a lot of time, but I'm prepared to give it right now because that's what I've committed to do.
Okay. So what are some of the major responsibilities of the chairman of?
So the BHG is a very well structured organization and it embodies a range of businesses, primarily hotels, because even though we're not the largest in terms of actual numbers of members, we, in terms of our contribution in dues and the way that the structure works, we are like a significant interest group within the association, but we have direct tourism services like restaurants and attractions, etc., that are part of it, airlines, travel agents. It really tries to encompass the full range of tourism businesses on the island. Okay. And so as chair, you're responsible for, one of the major things we do is lobbying to ensure that the policies that are put in place are supportive of the growth of and the viability of the industry. So a lot of what we do is having conversations with other stakeholders who impact on our viability as individual businesses. And so a lot of my time is spent right now just interacting with, as I said, different state government and our tourism marketing entity and just trying to have the conversations around how do we make this better, how do we do this better.
So Renee, I think you've touched on this some, but my question is, what would you like your legacy to be after you've finished or completed these different positions, roles? And I'm going to ask it from this way. What would you say to your 15-year-old self? And I'm saying 15-year-old because that's when we were in secondary school together. And what would you say maybe to your 25 to 28-year-old self, post-college and, still kind of look within different roles, trying to find your way?
I think in terms of what I would say to my 15 or 28-year-old self, I think it would probably be pretty much the same thing. You're going to be okay. You're going to be okay. Like, I don't know that, sometimes I think about things that I would have stressed about and worried about and decisions I would have made where I second guess myself. And I think to myself, everything I have done so far has led to where I am now. Mm-hmm. So there's nothing really that I should have a regret about. And I'm not somebody who made a lot of huge glaring mistakes. So maybe that is being a little bit blasé, but you're going to be okay. Like, just try. One of the things that I think I have done is try to make decisions based on my values. And I think that at the end of the day, that has never, ever led me far wrong. Like, having a values-based decision model has been very critical because lots of things change, but your values, your principles should be constant.
All right. So tell me a little bit about that.
Oh, Lord.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about your values. What would you consider those are? And I know hard work is one.
Yes.
Right? But share a little bit more about that.
So I think the values that I have are, again, based on things that I was seen modeled as a child by my grandmother, in particular my grandparents. Mm-hmm. So things like having integrity, doing what you say you're going to do when you say you're going to do it, holding family and relationships in high esteem, of course, having a good work ethic. And my grandmother was somebody who's always productive. And it might seem bizarre, but she had a small farm and she would do the farm and then she would come inside and she would cut up sorrel or she would grate cassava or she'd be watching TV or whatever. She would shell peas. But she was, even though I never felt like she saw it as work, but she was always doing something productive. Yeah. And but in very small ways, that has influenced me so much because I always feel like whatever I do should be lending to something. And so when you talk about legacy, like I hope that people look at me and say, I can do that. Because I'm real ordinary. I'm average. I always say I didn't get an island scholarship. But when people look at me and they see an average Bajan girl and they're like, I can do that. Because there's really nothing exceptional or special in my view about me. It's just some very little things that I try to do well that I think make a difference to helping me to be a little bit more effective, a little bit more successful. And so that is what my legacy I would like it to be, that people can look at me and say, that is achievable. Renee did that, man. And I opened that space for people because when I first came into the space, maybe there were less people that looked like me in it. But now, hopefully, because of me, there'll be even more people that look like me in this space. And so that's important to me.
Okay. And on that, how has it been, or do you see any challenges as a female, as a woman, as a black female, or any challenges around those, or is it the regular challenge that any business person would have?
I think there are challenges. The challenges I think you would know. Even in a predominantly black country, I think there are challenges around being a female black person in the space. Because as I said, I don't think there. And luckily we're seeing more and more, especially in tourism, female managers. I think it's always been a very kind of predominantly female area of work. But it's nice to see that we're getting more female managers, more females in positions of leadership. Mm-hmm. I mean, this BHGA, for example, I think has had 3 chairs who are female, and most of that happened in the last 12 years. So it's progress that's happened very quickly. Mm-hmm. And as I said, I think it is important that, for me, that we open up that conversation and we open up that space so that more women can step into it. And I have sons, so I am very conscious of the fact that we don't want to create gender biases which then disadvantage our males, because I feel that our males are a little bit in crisis, but that's a whole other discussion. But I do want to ensure that, as I said, people can see me in the space and not be surprised, or I can go into a bank and people not assume that, I'm the messenger, or people can come into I once had a white housekeeper, and people assumed that she was the manager by virtue of the fact that she was, we all wore the same Pirates Inn shirt, right. But many people came in and assumed she was the manager. And this is a small thing, but I want that people don't have to face the kind of foolish microaggressions that I will face. Like I literally will have guests say to me, when I tell them I'm the manager, so you manage this whole hotel? And I'm like, well, they only give me those 3 rooms, but I do a decent job. I want that we can be in this space and not have it questioned, that we belong here.
That we belong.
Yes.
Perfect. Great. Well, on that, I want to say thanks to Renee for taking her time out of her busy day to share with us. This has been a great conversation. Thank you, Renee. Is there anything that you want to end with?
No, I really am appreciative of this opportunity. I felt like I talked a lot, but your questions were great and allowed me to kind of reflect on things. So thank you. I've enjoyed it.
Thank you.